Hey, welcome to the Conservative Caucus podcast. This is Jim Pfaff, the president of TCC. I talked with Darrell Wood on the Run to Win radio show in Detroit, Michigan. I had this discussion with him on Election Day, and I think you're going to find it interesting. I've got a few of these where you can see what we were thinking going into it and kind of put together where we're going to go from here. You'll find this topic and discussion interesting with Darrell Wood in Detroit. And of course, Michigan was a key state for the election. So to connect with us, go to theconservativecaucus.org. You can send us a message as we're developing this podcast. We want to get your insights of who you'd like us to talk to. You're going to really enjoy some of the content, but we want to make sure it fits well into what you're thinking. So your feedback is just very critical to us. And while you're at our website, you can get grassroots lobbying tips, grassroots activism tips, rebuttals to Democrat stupid ideas, and our citizen action kit. So if you go to the top right corner and click sign up, you can get an abundance of resources on how you can be effective in your local community. Seriously, it is a training center. It will teach you how to be effective in grassroots. And also let us know if you'd like us to come into your area to help you get things done in your grassroots. With that, here's my discussion with Darrell Wood of Salem Media in Detroit.
I am joined by Jim Pfaff, president of the Conservative Caucus. Jim's political career stretches over 3 decades. Jim is a seasoned grassroots and campaign strategist, having led major congressional, state, legislative, and statewide ballot efforts. Jim, of course, has an impressive list of credentials, serving as a chief of staff for the Colorado House Republican Caucus. He has also served as a national representative for family policy councils that focus on the family. And, of course, he has served as chief of staff for 2 different congressmen. Congressman Thomas Massey, the Republican from Kentucky, and Congressman Thomas Hulskamp, the Republican from Kansas. He joins us now on Run to Win, the Darrell Wood Show. Jim, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here, Darryl.
Glad to have you here with us. And I would simply ask you right off the bat, Jim, how do you think things are going from the perspective of both early and today's voter turnouts? What do you think it looks like?
Well, based on the early voting turnout, you would easily, from an objective analysis, come to the conclusion in all the swing states that matter, Donald Trump's get out the vote effort is significant. You see this in Pennsylvania, where the blue wall, as they call it, of early voting in 2020 was somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million early votes, and this year that blue wall is only 400,000. What that means is that how many more Democrats than Republicans did early voting. Democrat early voting is way down, actually, in Pennsylvania. And so I think what we see is that if normal election outcome this day, which is always hard to indicate, I always get these stories in election days for 30-plus years that I've been doing this. We got massive turnout happening today, and sometimes it materializes, sometimes it doesn't. So it's hard to read. But if there's normal turnout, then that puts Donald Trump in a very strong position. My personal belief is that he's going to get somewhere between 311 and 315 electoral votes. But I don't know that for sure. There are still some outstanding things. But I do believe that there's a strong, strong advantage for Donald Trump happening right now that should bring him over the finish line.
Yeah, and that was the point that I was making earlier, that if you want your campaign to peak at just the right moment, it seems as though this is the moment at which Donald Trump's campaign is peaking. Do you think the record levels of Republican early voter turnout, as some have tried to argue, may have, in some sense, cannibalized the Republican vote so that we won't see as big numbers today as we might see in other elections in time past, specifically, again, for Republican voters?
Listen, that speculation's there, and it's certainly one thing to consider, but I don't believe that's the case. And I became more confident of that as I started to look more closely at early vote outcome that's been happening so far. And what you find out is that the low propensity voters, those who don't vote very often, are a very large number of these early votes. And that's significant because the higher propensity voters, they're definitely coming out one way or the other, whether they early vote or they vote on election day. They're going. And so that should indicate, and does to me, that this is actually going to materialize for Donald Trump. But my only concern out of all this is if I see anything tonight similar to what I saw in the Detroit tabulating center in 2020, where they're shoving out Republicans and only Democrats are doing the vote counts, then I'm going to get very, very concerned. And I generally oppose mail voting. And this is one of the reasons, is because you end up having these sorts of issues, whether they're valid or not, really cause people frustration. And so we'll see how that goes. But I do feel very confident about Donald Trump having a strong electoral win tonight.
There is some speculation that, and you've already alluded to it, but more specifically, the general analysis is black voters in larger urban areas are not turning out in the numbers that the Democrat Party says it needs to see. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm hearing exactly the same thing, and there is some very objective analysis that indicates this. What's going to be interesting tonight, and I heard this from my friend Cliff Maloney, who's one of the people heading up this massive get out the vote effort for Trump in Pennsylvania. He says to watch what's happening in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia comes in fairly early. And the reason I'm not pointing to Michigan right now is just because that's going to be an earlier poll close. And if Philadelphia shows numbers that are fairly low, that probably means that Donald Trump's going to win Pennsylvania handily, or at least, notably. And that trend will just continue through the night, I believe. And it'll be indicative of something broader that's going on. Because keep in mind, we have these national polls. National polls don't mean anything in presidential elections except to show, maybe give some mild sense of the general electorate. And when you consider the fact that Donald Trump is either down or up by 1 or 2 points in the national polls, if that number plays out tonight, then Kamala Harris really has no path to victory. Because remember, there are so many excess votes for Democrats happening in New York and in California and states like that, there's no way that Trump's going to win. So this would indicate, or seem to indicate, that all the other states that aren't so strongly Democrat are trending in Trump's direction. That makes a big difference in Michigan and in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. All these upper Midwest states we're concerned about. That should indicate something very good happening.
You mentioned Kamala Harris's path to an electoral college victory vote. I have always assumed, and based on what the data seem to indicate, that her path is narrower than is Donald Trump's. We hear that it runs especially through the suburbs of communities across the United States of America and is empowered by white female liberal votes. Is that what you're seeing and hearing?
To an extent, yes. What's really interesting, considering the fact that these early votes, they all materialize today on Election Day, we also have to ask that same question about female voters. They're voting in larger early voting numbers than others. By the way, I don't believe that that just because it's all female votes, that's all going to Kamala Harris. There are a whole bunch of motivated Trump women. But men do statistically tend to vote on Election Day as opposed to early voting. In greater numbers, they tend there. That would mean to me, it would be one indication of a wave. And you're certainly going to get the Harris voters coming out as well, too. But I don't believe, even though Harris has an advantage with women in the polls, the question is how motivated are those women that support her to actually come out? Well, we're seeing other indications that Democrats in general may not be as motivated to come out for her. That's going to translate both to men and women, and we'll see how that plays out. But, never underestimate the fact that the abortion issue for Democrats is an energizing factor. It was in 2022.
Yes.
And it is out there, but I don't see any and we saw objective reasons to think that was going to happen. Obviously, the Dodd decision overturned Roe v. Wade that year, and so it was still a visceral thing. That's not the same at this stage, and we have other indications that Trump is peaking at the right time. Frankly, I think he's been peaking all along. I think it's just a matter of going through the process, and people have their feelings as the pollsters ask them questions. And I have been predicting almost all year that he'd have a 311 to 315 electoral vote win.
I was saying to someone earlier today when they expressed their apprehension about what may or may not happen, I indicated that it was my opinion that Donald Trump would finish this race with a minimum of somewhere in the neighborhood of between 311 electoral college votes. But as you and I have both indicated here, we don't have a crystal ball. We're simply looking at some of the analytics that are available to us. But it looks very probable at this particular point in time that he could break through that 300 vote count in the Electoral College, especially based on what seems to be happening in some of the so-called key battleground states, some of the more anomalous activity that is happening in places like New Hampshire, what may be happening further west in Arizona, and with respect to what could happen in Wisconsin and possibly Michigan and North Carolina, Donald Trump has just multiple opportunities to break the 300 to 311, 315 electoral vote count. And I feel pretty good about it at this particular point in time. Of course, again, we'll have to wait and see. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the floor, as I predict it, and I put this up on my X account just to make sure it's for the record, the floor, in my opinion, is 286 for Trump. And that's losing Michigan and Wisconsin, but winning Pennsylvania. I really do believe that for Kamala Harris, Pennsylvania is a must-win state. I think if she loses Pennsylvania, it's over with. The question is, how big will Trump's win be? That's where I feel like the floor is based upon all the stuff that I'm looking at right now. But I feel very confident it's going to break 300 in electoral votes for him. I do believe that he's going to win Wisconsin. I believe he's going to get Nevada and Arizona.
Yep.
He's going to win North Carolina and Georgia, I believe. Now, at Michigan, I don't know how to quite call it, but I was very intrigued, and it surprised me because I didn't know what was happening, to see the Muslim community in Michigan endorse Donald Trump last night at the rally. That was, in my mind, pretty significant. And it indicates two things. It indicates that it's kind of a message to those who haven't voted yet in the Muslim community to go vote for Trump. And that's going to be significant because people are going to listen to him. Not everybody, but many. But the other thing is this. It also indicates that urging, that thinking of voting for Trump in the Muslim community has been stirring up over time. So I think, therefore, the early votes that have come into Michigan are probably a lot of Muslim votes, too. And in a state where the win or loss for Trump is going to be fairly narrow, that may make a huge difference. It's going to be one of the interesting stories of the night that we're going to wait to see. But it sure looks like it's very helpful for Donald Trump. We're going to know here in just a few hours.
I think that analysis, especially with regard to the Arab and or Muslim vote, is spot on, simply because they are also not talking about those who may vote for, but they are talking about those who may withhold support for Kamala Harris. That number could be anywhere from 75 to over 100,000 Arabs in the metropolitan Detroit area, more particularly and specifically in the Dearborn area, who may decide to simply withhold their support, which could, again, make a major difference in this contest in the state of Michigan. And as I said earlier in the program before we brought you on, if there are no anomalies, no anomalous developments with regard to any attempts to game the system, particularly like those that people are still ruminating over here in the Detroit area, it's not an impossibility that Donald Trump could win Michigan, although it will be very, very tight right up until, I guess, maybe the last moment, whether we find that out to be the case or not.
Well, in 2016, Macomb County made the difference in Michigan for Donald Trump. And we haven't even talked about that yet. That is likely to be helpful to Trump again in this election, as it was not, or at least not nearly as much so, and not enough to win the state in 2020. But that factor plus the Muslim factor, which I grant with you is a combination of voting and not voting. There are going to be a lot of people in the Muslim Arab community who are going to they can't stomach voting for Trump. and because they know he's relatively pro-Israel, and maybe they don't like that. I'm sure there's a decent amount of those sorts of people, but they aren't going to come out and vote for Harris because they are so upset with the Biden-Harris administration on that issue. There are a lot of dynamics that tell me that Michigan is very much in play.
Yes.
I personally predict he's going to win Michigan, but I think those two factors to me are significant. And then again, what's the turnout in Wayne County, and what does the African-American community do? We still have all of this indication, which we're only going to find out materialized after tonight, this indication that black male voters in fairly large numbers are voting for Donald Trump. That's going to be a big factor in cities like Detroit. Maybe not in every city around the nation, but definitely in the city of Detroit, where the reasons for that potential change are more prevalent than maybe in some other major cities. Philadelphia is one of those cities too. There are others.
Yes,
but that's a real key factor, and it is. I mean, to me, it's possible that Trump could win Michigan with 2 to 3 points. I think that's possible. I'm not predicting it, but I think it's possible. I do feel like, though, he's going to at least pull it out.
I think that all the indications are that he certainly can. It will be very interesting to see exactly how close he comes, if in fact he does pull it out, and by what margin. In the meantime, I think people have to also remember there seems to be a great deal of dissension and division with regard to the labor vote. And as you know, here in Michigan, particularly in the Detroit area, where we have a large union membership seems to be diverging from its leadership. And we found this out with the Teamsters Union in particular. And I've heard this just anecdotally from people calling this program to say that as a union member working with the United Auto Workers, I do not agree with the stance taken by the union leadership to support the Democrat Party candidate. And most of the people in the union with whom I commiserate feel just the opposite and will be casting their vote for Donald Trump. So that will be an interesting development to watch as well, especially, as I said, again, we know the Teamsters are demonstrating that there's about a 60-30 divide with regard to their membership across the country. Wherever you go and look at the sample of union membership voting for Donald Trump and against Kamala Harris, or voting for Kamala Harris and against Donald Trump seems to be carrying the day. Your thoughts?
Last night in Pittsburgh, the United Steelworkers, many of those people were standing behind him on the stage when he was speaking. I am convinced that union membership all over the country, except maybe, for example, the SEIU type union workers, which, he may have gotten to in Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada area when he talked about no tax on tips because it affects those people. But they're probably not in as strong numbers. But your standard traditional unions like United Auto Workers, United Steelworkers, Teamsters, all the AFL-CIO related unions, there is a large number of people there who are very concerned about trade, and they feel confident, and it does affect them very much directly. And when United Auto Workers guys and gals, when they hear Donald Trump talk about, we're not going to be selling your cars that you're making in Mexico, you're going to have to make them here, that just sings to United Auto Worker, to most United Auto Worker people. And so there's every reason to believe that the union factor may be the biggest one that we, as you say, because of the Teamsters thing we all know about, but it's the one we can't yet fully calculate. We're going to find out how that played out after tonight, and it may end up being a very significant factor that surprises all of us. At a minimum, it helps the voting base for Donald Trump to hold and to expand from 2020.
For the last few moments, we've been talking with Jim Pfaff. He is the president of the Conservative Caucus, giving us his astute analysis of how things seem to look on the ground during Election Day today, 2024, where America is making a decision about the next president of the United States. Jim, it's been great. Your information has been absolutely stellar. I appreciate the time you've taken and the information you've shared with us on the program today. We look forward to talking with you again in the not-too-distant future, sir.
Thanks, sir. I'm glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, sir.
So before we get to some closing thoughts on this podcast, I just want to thank you for joining us. I think you're going to really enjoy these podcasts and the information we're going to bring your way. Make sure that you check out our show notes. We'll have parts of the discussion there, links to things that can help you, links to where you can sign up on our website to be able to learn more about how to be effective in your community, how to find out what we're doing so you can be involved with that, and other information you'll find useful. And of course, please give us feedback. Go to info or send us an email at info@theconservativecaucus.org. That's info@theconservativecaucus.org. Let us know who you'd like us to have on the podcast, information you'd like us to discuss. And by the way, I would just encourage you, take some time to look for me on X. I'm at Jim Pfaff. We'll have that in the show notes. Make sure that you follow me there, because I'm very often doing or participating in X spaces. You can see some other things that I'm talking about. And then, of course, leave me a note there and give me a follow. And TC Caucus, at TC Caucus on X as well. With that, let's get some final thoughts.